Morning, everybody. Hope you're well. This is Recession Rebellion, end of week 7. So next week we are into week 8. And as I was just saying, for those of you who logged on a couple of minutes early, coming out of lockdown, it sounds, or at least partly coming out of lockdown. Let's go to the beer garden, which would be nice, wouldn't it? Especially over the summer. So you're on with Phil and Martin as ever. And just a couple of things quickly to say today before we get going. So in terms of what's happening next week, I'm back on Tuesday, and I shall be talking about life post-lockdown and how we start to think about our businesses in that context. And on Wednesday next week, we have got a very, very brilliant coach called KP joining us to give us her take on resilience. So as always, lots of things to look forward to. You're also flying solo with me on Tuesday and Wednesday next week. Martin Lucas is having a holiday. So before we allow him to go on his holidays, he's going to give us one of his brilliant Thursday sessions now. So as always with us, try and give you something new, something interesting to think about, something to action straight from this. And today's theme is all about crisis-driven anxiety, how to identify and mug off crisis-generated anxiety. I can honestly say to you, Martin, you are talking of mugging off a man I would not want to meet in a darkened alley late at night. And with that, over to you.
Thanks, Phil. So what I thought I'd do with everybody this week is that just give you some strategies and some ways to understand why we're all feeling a little bit more anxious at the moment and what we can do about it. So as Phil mentioned, we're about to get some lift of our lockdown, and what's more than likely going to happen to people is that we're going to have a much higher expectation of what actually is going to happen with it. And I wanted to help you identify what is causing anxiety right across the board for every human on this planet at the moment, and what you can do about it. That's the goal of today. So first of all, why are we feeling more anxious? Because you might say, well, I'm not necessarily feeling anxious. I'm not aware of it. I'm not sure if I am. Or you might be saying, yeah, absolutely, I'm feeling that. So there's a number of different factors going on within our lives. The biggest thing for me is that from a psychological point of view is we're living inside the scarcity principle. And the way the scarcity principle works is that when something is taken from us, so if we lose a job, we've got no income, if we're short of money and we can't buy food, or if we end a relationship so we feel like we're out of love, these things that get taken from us become the dominant thing within our system. And when we think about the scarcity principle, the vast majority of it that happens and what generates some anxiety is unconscious. So generally, anxiety only comes to us when it's kind of like the end of the sum in the brain. So we suddenly start feeling like our blood pressure's jacked. We feel like our arms are tingling a little bit. And that's anxiety kicking in after a bunch of negative thinking patterns that's happening behind the scenes within the brain. And then it becomes conscious, and then the body starts reacting. And that's really the flow of how anxiety works. And we crave what we do not have. So we humans are very addicted machines. That's the difference between us and computers using the machine learning and AI stuff that Phil and I were just knocking around, right? Is that we humans crave what we don't have because we like normal. It's not that we're addicted to wanting something we don't have. We want to have the things that we're used to. So if you think about anxiety when it comes to normal, like pre-pandemic stuff, when somebody's getting bullied, they're getting their control system taken away from them, and they're getting told that they're not good at something, or they can't do it, or they can't go to a place that they want to because the bully is both mentally and physically blocking what they do. And that's one of the biggest causes of all types of anxiety. This anxiety that we're dealing with at the moment is that what's getting taken away from us mainly is freedom. So if you think about what that is, none of you, I doubt, have sat down and said, I'm missing my freedom. Right? This is the point about anxiety and about the scarcity principle, is that in our psyche and psychologically is that we're feeling like something's been taken away from us, but we don't normally talk or think about freedom, right? Because it's just normally part of our day-to-day life. So if we don't have to think about it, and we've never really thought about it, then we don't realize that when it's taken away, it has a cause and effect with us. So when I talk about these unconscious forces, it's a very real thing, because the psychology and the psyche inside the brain is that you've got millions of different conditions about this to do with scarcity principles, to do with living, to do with how you feel, to do with your balance of self, your control of self. It's only when something gets taken away that you've never had to think about that anxiety rises. So, wonderful gift. You know, I love a gift for these weekly ones anyway, right? So, anxiety comes from how we are treated. So, I was talking about bullying, right? So, let's hope that nobody on this call at the moment, I hope that you're not as being bullied at the moment. But the way that we're being treated at the moment is that we're being told that we can't do things. We shouldn't leave the house. We shouldn't see friends. We shouldn't do things. We can't go to places. We can't do what we wanted. So, unconsciously, again, the way we're being treated is pushing away that sense of freedom from self. But the biggest thing about anxiety and life and everything that you're going to do today and forevermore comes from how you see it. Because how we see life and how we interpret it, that's what generates more or less anxiety. So it's not that anxiety is not real, but it is breakable. All of it is breakable. And that's what I wanted to focus on today, because when you can manage anxiety, you can make yourself unbreakable in a very, very positive way. And here's how we can do that. So, how you see the world literally is going to be the key part about moving from semi-release from lockdown. I don't know what the terminology, I'm sure Phil's got a good, he's better with phrases than I am. But as of Sunday, we're going to get recommended social distancing so we can leave the house, we believe. And I think we're going to be allowed to go for picnics. But they're not necessarily going to open this and open that. So there'll be a little bit more freedom, but not quite enough. And it's all about how you see that not quite enough. Because my goal today is to make you realize that once you can identify any causation to do with anxiety, like just now this loss of freedom, you can understand it, you can take it forward, and you can start to manage it. If you can manage something, you can accept it. And when you accept it, most of the time what we're dealing with is stopping something going into a neurotic behavior. Because that's a big part of anxiety, is that it causes a lot of neurosis, whether that's paranoia, whether it's overthinking, whether it's negative thinking patterns, whether it's higher blood pressure, whether it's a physical reaction within the body. It's generally a little bit of all those things. But if you can identify it, you can just apply a very practical lens and say, as I've said on many of these calls, does this serve me? And the biggest thing I want you to take away from today is just about your own freedom. The only person that's taking away your freedom at the moment is you. So I'm not saying that people are telling you that you can't do different things, but it's all about how you interpret it. Because that's where your opportunity really comes from. Because if you go out to the world for the rest of today, and I'd love you to just to take a test and say, the opportunity that I've got is that I have my health. I've had to lose a little bit of freedom, but what does that actually mean? Does it mean that I'm looking at the world slightly differently? For me personally, when I go on my morning runs, I don't know whether it's just me, but I don't really care, is that nature feels a little bit brighter. I feel like the skies aren't getting poisoned enough. We're not hearing all the cars. The solitude is a lot nicer. I like that. It's a little bit quieter. I feel that there's lots of positives coming out of that, because that's how I see the world and what I'm interpreting with it. And I didn't start like that on March 13th. It's something that's become more into my system. And I feel like I've had a lot of interactions with people where it feels like people are walking about into the world and they've just got their head looking a little bit higher, and we're taking in things a little bit better. And I don't wish anyone to lose their jobs. I really don't. But I wasn't sad when I read the headline that 3,000 Virgin jobs were being lost. Well, I wasn't happy about that. But the fact that they were shutting down Gatwick, the fact that you're starting to hear that large corporations are changing their travel policies and asking whether people need to travel as much, there's going to be a lot of upsides for that, for our sense of self, for our mindset, for our balance, for feeling a little bit less busy. Everybody just needs to make sure they grab hold of that and take advantage of it. So here's my thoughts, is that reality is no more than a perception, right? So it's literally how you see the world is going to be how the world sees you, right? It's going to be that type of interpretation. So anxiety is a self-generated perception at the moment. So I'm not talking about bullying. I'm not talking about anything other than this loss of freedom is causing anxiety within all of our systems. And what I'm bringing is bringing it forward to the front of your mind so that you have awareness of what's actually causing it. And the thing about putting these things together is that it's about combining all these things and saying it's a fallacy, right? So have you got a loss of freedom? Yeah, at the moment you're being asked to do things that keeps you safe, right? So the loss of freedom needs to be conscious to say it's actually not a loss of freedom. It's a choice that you're making to serve yourself, to keep yourself healthy, and to keep other people healthy. And as we come out of this semi-lockdown, we're going to have a choice, which is to run back to what we know, or just take a little bit of a balance. And I'd love everybody to take a little bit of balance for self, because don't get me wrong, I'm going to rush through the door to Nando's as soon as it opens, because that's one of my guilty pleasures, right? But I want to make sure that I balance this with an understanding of who I am, what I want to get from life. And any time that anxiety is being caused for me in the future, which is not the first time that I've been through anxiety for myself personally. I'm a great overthinker about different things. So I like to point that out, because it's not me trying to put myself on a pedestal about mindset and neuroscience and psychology. I've studied all of that and I understand it all, and I've built a business around it, but that doesn't mean that I'm a perfect example of using it. So we've all got a choice. And that's the most amazing thing in the world, is that we've got a choice about everything. This idea that we feel short of time and we don't have access to things in life and we want the next material item is all a perception about how we live. So just to round it off, here's the tips, right? Number one is you are not alone. And it's still a big challenge when it comes to mental health, is that we don't talk about things enough. And if we did, we'd realize, and this is the number one thing that comes up in psychiatry and psychoanalysis and psychotherapy and hypnotherapy and all kinds of therapy, is that once people realize that they're not alone, that lots of other people feel the same way that they do, deal with the same things, it's a great way to release yourself. So first thing is recognize that you're not alone. The second thing is the force of nature right now is lots of doom and gloom. I've not watched the news for years, and I just don't watch it. I'll look at the occasional headlines on a website just to get an idea of what the mood of people doing is. But I avoid it, not because I'm trying to avoid reality, but actually the world, and particularly the media, plays a game of suffering. It encourages humans to play a game of suffering. So you're very unlikely to switch on the news and feel a lot better after it. It just fills you full of negative energy. And I'm all about positive energy, which again is not ignoring reality, but it's just eliminating things that stops you from optimizing yourself, to think the best way about life and to look at things as opportunities. Because Recession Rebellion alumni are crushing it. Phil and I were just having a chat just before we started recording. He's picked up a big contract this week. I got 2 new clients last week. We've got 1 more coming in this week. We've got 3 contracts out for significant partnerships. Not because we have the most world-beating value and proposition and all that kind of stuff. We've got good products. We're very dedicated to what we do. We are hardworking. Our teams are hardworking. But like us and other people that are on this call, we've just taken the mindset that the helpfulness and being true to what we are and what we understand, we weren't going to let a pandemic defeat us. So everything is possible. And the final tip is knowing that you are free is the key to releasing self. So this idea that people are holding back your freedom is only something that's within your mind. And I'd love you to release yourself from that. And that's it for today, Phil. Any questions?
Sorry, just learning how to click buttons there. So the first question has come in. If you are a manager, how would you apply this to your team?
I think the first thing is the crisis under pressure stuff, right? So the more content that you are and the more you take on board what we spoke about today, it's going to naturally flow out about what you're asking people to do. And because we're moving out of this semi-lockdown, it means that if you give it about a week, the minds are going to start opening up a little bit, where we'll be more accepting in terms of your employees and your teams to a little bit more future planning and future discussion. And that's actually a really positive thing to put into people's systems, because once they realize they can start planning next week, next month, a monthly report, a June activity, those types of things, then you're going to get a lot more acceptance and people are going to move past inertia. And for anybody watching this, jump on the YouTube channel, watch the episode which I did yesterday that Phil did about inertia again, because it's really, really powerful stuff. And that would be a great tip for that, I think.
Good stuff. So, good morning, Phil. We get established habits and tried and tested ways. When these are stripped away, we enter what we perceive to be uncharted waters. What are the best ways to resolve uncertainty and plan ahead in these interesting times we're living? So I suppose what Anita's talking about here is the fact that this is feeling like a really unknown time to lots of people. So anxiety comes from the unknown, right? And it comes from a feeling that things are unknown. I mean, I have a view personally, as you know from previous seminars, about actually there's a lot of predictability happening right now. It's less unknown than it appears to be. But accepting the premise of the question, what are the best ways to deal with the fact that for a lot of people this feels like completely uncharted territory, and that's the thing that's kind of bringing anxiety to the fore?
Yeah, it's fair. It's a very fair thing. I would say that you can only plan as far as you can see. And what I mean by that is that it's much easier for my business to plan really far in the future, because we can anticipate what we're doing because of the B2B nature of what we sell, and the fact that what we do is revenue growth and revenue protection, right? So it's easier for us to plan really far into the future. If you were dealing with, say, something to do with travel, you need to be really short term and be focusing on what difference you can make for people and how you can anticipate what's happening. So I would say that there's a kind of scale about what uncertainty actually looks like. But my tip is you can only ever live within the now. So just make that what your dominant kind of component is as well. And beyond anything else is the two other tips. One is that I'm not selling the YouTube channel for the sake of it. It's just because it's coming up. If you go into the YouTube channel, Phil has a playlist. And if you look at uncertainty and resilience and responsiveness and inertia, these are all things that Phil manages really well. So I'd watch that playlist would be tip one. And tip two is that I would focus on positive thinking and positive energy. And again, as I've spoken about every single Thursday, I think pretty much, is that positive thinking is not about saying that there's not negative things going on, but it's about bringing balance to your style of thinking and understanding that you can only look as far ahead as the things that you can control. Everything else is uncertain, so why think about it? Only think about the things that you can control.
A quite brilliant question has just arrived as well. What if we are surrounded by lots of anxious people? Do we support or minimize those interactions? I think this is a very good question, because it's there's a famous coach called Dan Pena who always talks about, you show me your friends, I'll show you your future, you know?
Right.
And there is that sort of thing that people wrestle with sometimes, which is it our job to what extent do we have to surround ourselves with positive, enabling people? And there's kind of that creates kind of upward spiral, versus actually do we have almost like a duty of care, I suppose, to support people and help them negate their own anxiety through our behaviour?
Yes, it's a fantastic question. So let's make the assumption that we're talking, because of what's going on at the moment, right? You're talking about your partner, your flatmate, somebody that you live with one way or the other, right? That's generally going to be this situation, I would imagine. What I would suggest for that is that most people, when we go about in life, is that we're looking to have an argument with ourselves, and that manifests into an argument with somebody else, right? So before we even get to anxiety, I always box off what you're doing at home, right? So my wife and I have a rule, because we're both mega focused when we're at work, which can make us super short when we're interacting during the day. So we always pick a time where we've got like half an hour to sit down with each other during the day, just to have a chat. So you've got everything leveled off within your brain, so it's kind of boxed off. And then we only talk about work up until 7 p.m. And then we've got a cut off after that. After 7 p.m. is generally what you get is a little bit of the sharing about the anxiety, and you hear more about what's going on. So to answer the question, it depends on what type of person you are, but you need to make sure that you're not feeding one another's kind of anxiety, because that's the most common thing. It's like when you're frustrated, you feed each other's frustrated. When you're anxious, you feed each other's anxiety. So if you're not feeling good, then absolutely avoid it, because there's absolutely no upside in it, because being around somebody that's anxious when you feel anxious is only going to increase the load of that. So you've just got to make sure that you're boxing off your brain, so that when you help somebody or when you get help, you feel ready for one or the other, because otherwise you're just going to pour in your own issues into that conversation. You're not going to help the person, you're not going to help you, and it just gets worse and worse.
I think it reminds me of that thing that we talk about in coaching sometimes. All relationships are co-created. So, there is me, there is you, and then there is this thing that we're creating between us called the relationship.
Right.
And I think that it's useful to try and think about a relationship as being a co-creative thing, because we say this a lot to clients particularly clients who are struggling sometimes with managing upwards, or they have tricky colleagues to work with. It's like, you can't change somebody else's neurological processes. You can't force other people into coaching or counselling or whatever it is they need. What you can do is you can change your relationship with them. And in changing your relationship with them, you can actually change the relationship. Do you know what I mean? It's like because half of the relationship, if you change the energy, you're changing the relationship as a whole. And it sort of brings that back up for me. It's like, how are we showing up in relationships where the other party is characterized by higher levels of anxiety? And also, so what is kind to people sometimes? I mean, sometimes they actually need, how do I put it, a gentle slap to their senses. So here we go. I'll just let me read this quickly. Okay, interesting. So somebody writes here, I've got to a point where new clients, and somebody's starting up a consultancy back end of last year, or starting a new business back end of last year, new clients were coming in March, then everything got put on pause until July. So there's a lot of anxiety here about the fact that this particular question goes to, I set up a business, everything was going fine, COVID hit, and everything's been put on pause. I haven't had a chance to establish myself properly, so I don't know if I can afford or want to wait until the late summer. What do I do about that? So a lot of anxiety over what is the right course of action for me right now, given that everything I thought was going to happen is not going to happen. I have a view on this. Martin, do you first.
The number one thing is that whoever that person is, they've got the opportunity to reach out to me on email, and I'll have to have a one-to-one session looking at their value proposition and just some complementary strategy stuff to help them with that, first of all. The second part is that I don't know what the business is, but your business was going well, right? So you were setting it up well and things were going well until March. So just go back and have a look at what was so great about your value, about your proposition, about what you're putting in front of people. Don't assume that it's going to have to wait until late summer. I understand that people have put stuff on hold till July, but now is the time to start doubling down, if not tripling down, on those things that were working before and get them working again. Because whatever you're doing, if it's consultancy especially, is that people need answers to problems they don't understand. And if you can go out there and understand and share that value about how you want to help people and how you can, and you can drive it, and this is what I would do in the one-to-one session, is look at the emotional gains and the meaning of what you're getting out there. I would step that forward. And the other thing is that, based on some of the language that you're using, is that don't take the pandemic personally, which is a really difficult thing. I've spoken about the 4 agreements before, and one of them is don't take it personally. And it's hard because it feels like, for me, that I was building up such a head of steam and then had to rechange everything from March 13th. And I took a mindset of making hay while the sun shines, and it's worked incredibly well, but I've had to work double, if not triply hard, and I was a pretty hard worker before that. So I think there's some balance that can come with it. I think you just can't let yourself be defeated, and some of your language is like you've already decided that the future's not going to work for what you're looking to do. So you've just got to challenge yourself about it. But as we've said, we're true to our word. Reach out to me and I'll help you.
That's great, Martin, and I'm sure really appreciate it. I think I would just say, from my point of view, that 5 years ago, I started Corporate Punk with no clients, no idea how to get clients, a network that I didn't think was good enough, and a runway that was really tiny for all sorts of reasons. And the one thing that I would say the last 5 years has taught me is that the next project and the next client is always on its way. And I started off with a scarcity mentality 5 years ago of thinking, God, this could be the last one. And whereas now I just see it as a game of understanding that sometimes the pipeline moves a little bit more slowly and sometimes it moves a little bit more quickly. But there's always loads of opportunity out there, and the next project's always on its way to you. And even when it gets really tough, that's the thing that I always think is right. It's just like the next thing's always coming. It may be coming a bit slower than I want it to. And after 5 years, honestly, that's just proven out to be true every single month or week or year. And the other thing as well is that, the nature of the game that we're in here, and Martin will attest to this, you can win something new and start to execute something new actually in a matter of hours or a matter of days. You know, it doesn't need to be a super long sales cycle. And actually, at the moment, I think one of the things about COVID is it won't be a really long sales cycle, because actually people are going to come out of this and go, shit, we need help, right? And I think the decisions about moving on stuff will actually happen really quickly, because the change that's happening is happening really quickly, and the needs will come up really quickly as well. So I suppose I totally agree with that, Martin. I think it's a really brilliant observation about not taking this pandemic personally, actually. That's really, really good. Beyond that, I think all I can do is speak from my own experience on this, and experience of many other consultants that I've helped and coached I've helped over the years, is that the next project's always on its way. But know at the moment that sales cycles can actually be a lot quicker than they are even in normal times. So hopefully, in amongst everything we just talked about there, there's a bit of hope, and I would absolutely take Martin up on that offer. I absolutely would do that. I think it would be a very smart thing to do. He hints. That is it for today. Martin, as always, thank you. I thought the questions today particularly were really interesting, actually, which is always a great sign that what you've talked about resonates. No time spent dwelling on the nature of anxiety and how we can overcome anxiety at the moment is wasted. And as always, I thought it was really, really interesting and engaging session. And I said to Martin last week, by the way, that the session he did last Thursday actually personally really helped me quite a lot. So, you know, we're getting stuff out of this ourselves as well, you know, even as the hosts here. So early next week, as I say, Tuesday, I'm back on my own, working Zoom on my own. So what could possibly go wrong there? We look forward to watching our technology fail spectacularly in the absence of Martin Lucas while he's on holidays. And I will also on Tuesday be making quite a significant announcement about corporate punk as well on this forum. So look forward to seeing you all there, and have a great weekend. That was Recession Rebellion week 7. Tatty bye.